It was a cold morning in May 1971. The vast desert of New Mexico stretched silent beneath the rising sun, its sands already shimmering with heat, though dawn had only just broken. On the edge of that desert stood Holloman Air Force Base, a place accustomed to secrets. Here, test pilots flew experimental aircraft, engineers tinkered with prototypes, and security teams kept a watchful eye on the skies. But nothing could have prepared them for what happened that day. At 7:30 a.m., radar operators detected something unusual. An object appeared on their screens, moving steadily toward the base. At first they assumed it was a conventional aircraft, perhaps a stray private plane or an unscheduled military flight. But as the seconds passed, unease grew. The object moved too smoothly, too deliberately. Its speed was constant, not buffeted by winds or turbulence. It glided, silent, purposeful. Controllers radioed out, demanding identification. No response. They checked flight schedules. No aircraft was due. Yet the object was coming closer, descending slowly. Soldiers on the tarmac began to look up, shading their eyes against the morning glare. And then they saw it. Hanging in the sky above Holloman was no ordinary plane. Witnesses would later describe it as oval, metallic, reflecting the desert sun like a mirror. It hovered with impossible stillness. No wings, no propellers, no jet exhaust. Just silence. The kind of silence that hums in your bones. As it descended, a second and third object appeared, following behind the first. The three moved in formation, deliberate and precise. Then, suddenly, two of them veered off, climbing sharply into the sky until they vanished into the blue. The remaining craft lowered itself toward the runway, as though choosing Holloman as its landing site. The base erupted into controlled chaos. Security forces rushed into position. Trucks rolled out. Cameras were brought to the edge of the tarmac. Somewhere a man gave the order, "Keep filming." Soldiers braced themselves for impact, for confrontation, for anything. And then, before their disbelieving eyes, the craft touched down. It didn't slam into the runway. It didn't skid or bounce. It lowered itself, slowly, deliberately, until it rested on three landing struts that extended from its underside. Dust swirled around it. The metallic hull gleamed, smooth and seamless. There were no markings, no insignia, nothing to suggest it belonged to any nation on Earth. For a moment no one moved. The air was electric, the silence unbearable. Soldiers kept their weapons ready, but their hands shook. Officers barked orders, but their voices faltered. What were they witnessing? A test gone wrong? A visitor from another world? Then a hatch opened. A ramp extended slowly from the craft's underside, pressing against the hot runway with a hollow clang. From the darkness within, figures emerged. Accounts vary, whispered decades later. Some say there were three of them, tall and slender, with pale skin and large eyes. Others recall only two, their movements deliberate, their heads covered by helmets that concealed their faces. What everyone agreed on was this: they were not human pilots stepping from a secret plane. They were something else. They walked calmly, as if they had done this before. No panic, no hesitation. Straight down the ramp, toward the waiting officers who stood frozen in disbelief. One of the men in uniform, some say a colonel, stepped forward, his hand raised in greeting. The being stopped, only a few feet away. For a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, incredibly, they spoke, not with their mouths, but with a presence that seemed to echo inside the witnesses' heads. Some swore they heard words, clear and resonant. Others described only emotions, a wave of calm that washed over them. Whatever it was, the tension broke. The soldiers lowered their weapons. The officers listened, and the cameras kept rolling. The meeting on the runway lasted only minutes, enough for greetings, for some kind of exchange that no one outside the circle of officers would ever fully understand. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it ended. The beings returned to their craft. The ramp retracted. The hatch sealed. The ship rose silently into the sky, accelerating with impossible speed. In seconds, it was gone. The desert was quiet again. The runway empty. But nothing at Holloman Air Force Base would ever be the same. The footage was locked away immediately. Rumors say it was over 15 minutes long, capturing every moment of the descent, the landing, the encounter. Some claim it was reviewed by officials at the Pentagon. Others whisper it was shown briefly to high-ranking politicians, then buried. Years later, fragments of the film would surface in a strange and unexpected way. But the full truth remained hidden. For those who were there, the memory was etched forever. The sight of the craft glinting in the desert sun, the figures stepping into the human world as calmly as if they belonged, and the knowledge that, for a few minutes in 1971, something unearthly touched down on American soil and walked among us. The landing at Holloman Air Force Base should have been the most important film ever captured in human history. But instead, it was hidden, sealed away in vaults, and whispered about only in classified rooms. For years, no one outside the base even knew it existed. That changed in 1973. NBC was preparing a television special titled UFOs, Past, Present, and Future. It was meant to be a balanced documentary, examining sightings and myths, skeptical and serious at the same time. But what shocked the production team was that the United States Air Force quietly cooperated with the project. A few officers even hinted that something extraordinary could be shown, something never meant for the public eye. When the program aired, viewers were stunned. In the final act of the documentary, a sequence appeared that no one expected. The narrator calmly described a supposed incident at Holloman Air Force Base. And then, for a few brief moments, grainy footage flickered across the screen. The clip was short, only seconds long, but unforgettable. It showed a metallic craft descending over a desert runway. Not a saucer, not a jet. Something different. Something diamond-shaped, gleaming in the sun. Viewers saw it lower itself onto the ground, perfectly still, dust swirling around its landing struts. The narrator explained that the U.S. Air Force has released this footage to NBC, showing a UFO landing at Holloman Air Force Base. That was it. No more context, no more explanation, just a glimpse, enough to spark a firestorm. Millions of Americans watched that night. Some dismissed it as a hoax or special effects, but others swore it was real, the most authentic UFO footage ever broadcast on television. Letters poured into NBC demanding answers. Who filmed it? Where was the rest? Why show just a few seconds? Behind the scenes, the truth was stranger. Rumors spread that NBC had been shown a far longer reel. Over 15 minutes of raw footage, capturing not just the landing, but the encounter itself. Witnesses stepping from the craft, officers approaching them, an exchange, however brief, between two species under the desert sun. According to insiders, NBC producers were desperate to include more. But pressure came swiftly. The Air Force, once cooperative, suddenly clamped down. Lawyers intervened. Executives were warned. The network was told that no additional footage could be shown. What aired was only a sanitized fragment, carefully chosen, designed to intrigue but reveal nothing. And then the reel vanished. Attempts to obtain it met silence. Those who had handled the original film spoke of military couriers who collected it immediately after use. Copies were destroyed. Even NBC's archives contained only the edited documentary version, stripped of the longer footage they once previewed. The controversy only fueled speculation. Had the government intentionally leaked just enough to test public reaction? Or was it a mistake? A crack in the wall of secrecy quickly sealed. For UFO researchers, it became an obsession. They combed through every frame, enhancing the footage, trying to determine its authenticity. The landing struts, the dust clouds, the way the craft hovered so unnaturally still. For decades, skeptics and believers clashed over those few seconds of film. Some claimed it was merely a model, a reconstruction staged by NBC. Others insisted it was real, a fragment of the hidden reel, and the deeper one dug, the more chilling the whispers became. Insiders swore that the full reel showed more than just machines and dust. It showed beings, figures stepping into human sight, moving with calm precision, meeting with American officers on the runway. It showed contact. But those images never reached the public. They were buried, locked in archives no one could access, erased from official records. The only trace that remained was the grainy clip that slipped through the cracks, the forbidden footage broadcast once and never again. For ordinary viewers in 1973, it was a curiosity. For researchers, it was a clue. But for those who had been at Holloman 2 years earlier, watching from the runway as the impossible unfolded, it was confirmation of what they already knew. They had witnessed something the world was not supposed to see, and the government had made sure it stayed that way. The brief clip from the 1973 NBC documentary should have been the beginning of a new era. Instead, it became a ghost, a fragment that haunted everyone who saw it, but led nowhere. After that night, the Air Force denied everything. NBC executives refused further comment, and those who tried to dig deeper found doors slamming shut. But researchers refused to let it go. By the late 1970s, the Holloman incident was whispered among UFO circles as the most important case of all. If the landing was real, if the meeting between humans and non-humans truly happened, then it was bigger than Roswell. This wasn't a crash. This wasn't wreckage. This was contact. Investigators began chasing witnesses, a few anonymous sources, men who claimed to have been stationed at Holloman, spoke in hushed tones. They described being ordered to stay away from the runway that morning. They remembered unusual activity, cameras being rushed out, security cordons tightening. One man even claimed he saw the craft with his own eyes, hovering like a silent mountain of metal before being pulled away by superior officers. But the stories came with fear. Some men refused to be named. Others abruptly cut off contact after agreeing to interviews. A few researchers reported being followed, their phones tapped. Was it paranoia or a deliberate effort to silence them? And then there were the deaths, not murders in the open, but quiet tragedies. A radar technician who supposedly saw the tapes died in a car accident. A cameraman rumored to have handled the reel succumbed to a sudden heart attack at 42. Each death could be explained, but together they painted a darker pattern. The longer researchers pushed, the more elusive the truth became. The official reel, over 15 minutes of raw footage, was said to be locked deep in government archives, accessible only to a handful of men. Some claimed it was stored at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, in the same vaults rumored to hold Roswell debris. Others swore it had been flown to Washington, placed under the strictest classification. Every trail ended the same way. Silence. But the rumors refused to die. In the 1980s, retired officials began to whisper about a secret program known as Project Aquarius. According to leaks, it documented meetings with non-human entities, and the Holloman landing was one of them. Some said the 1971 event wasn't even the first, that there had been other landings, other exchanges, kept carefully hidden from the public. For believers, it explained everything. The film, the helicopters, the secrecy. For skeptics, it was madness. But one fact could not be ignored. The clip had aired, millions had seen it, and no one, not even the government, could erase that memory. As years passed, the mystery of Holloman became a legend. Researchers argued whether the broadcast was real footage or a staged dramatization. Skeptics claimed NBC had been tricked, that the sequence was only a reconstruction. But others, who had studied every frame, swore it had the grain and authenticity of military film stock. The dust patterns, the sunlight glare, too real to fake. And always, the whispers grew darker. Witnesses silenced. Film reels hidden. A secret meeting between species erased from the official story. By the 1990s, the Holloman incident had become a myth that refused to die. Like a shadow at the edge of history, it lingered, untouchable, yet undeniable. And those who had chased it for decades were left with a chilling question. If the footage still exists, locked away in some government vault, what exactly does it show? Decades have passed since that strange morning at Holloman Air Force Base. The desert has not changed. The sands still shimmer under the relentless sun. The mountains still loom on the horizon. But for those who remember, the place will never be the same. It is haunted, not by ghosts, but by a memory the world was never meant to keep. The footage shown on NBC in 1973 remains one of the most mysterious broadcasts in American history. No one has ever explained why it was aired or why it was so quickly buried afterward. To this day, the network insists it is no longer real in its archives. The Air Force denies all involvement. And yet, witnesses swear the full tape exists. 15 minutes of undeniable proof that something other than human touched down on U.S. soil. Researchers still argue. Some insist the landing was real, part of a series of clandestine meetings between governments and non-human entities. They point to Project Aquarius, to whispers of treaties signed in silence, to decades of sightings that suddenly make more sense if you accept Holloman as fact. Others dismiss it as clever theater, a dramatization mistaken for reality, its myth fueled by paranoia and secrecy. But the deeper truth is not in the arguments, it is in the silence. If it were a hoax, why has the film never been re-released? Why not admit it was staged, archive it openly, laugh it off? Instead, it vanished. Every attempt to retrieve it has been blocked, denied, erased. And so the legend lives. The Holloman landing is spoken of in hushed tones, an almost sacred myth in UFO lore. For some, it is a beacon of hope, that we are not alone, that contact has already been made. For others, it is a warning, proof that governments will bury the greatest truths to preserve power. Betty Cash and Vicki Landrum were scarred by their encounter with the unknown in Texas. The children of Ariel School in Zimbabwe still whisper about the beings they saw in 1994. And at Holloman, in 1971, perhaps the greatest secret of all unfolded in broad daylight on a military runway. But unlike the others, this one was caught on film, a film no one is allowed to see. The moral is chilling in its simplicity. The truth may already be here. We may have shaken hands, literally or figuratively, with visitors from beyond. But the moment the camera rolled, the truth was stolen, caged, hidden behind walls of secrecy. Some truths are not denied, they are erased. And that is what makes Holloman so terrifying. Not that a ship landed, not that beings walked among soldiers, but that the proof was taken, destroyed, buried, leaving only whispers. And in those whispers, the story survives. A forbidden film, a desert runway, a landing that never happened, or perhaps happened too clearly. And tonight, as you look up at the sky and wonder what might be moving silently above, remember the words that UFO researchers often repeat when speaking of Holloman. The tape exists. The question is, who is still watching it?